Hey everybody, this is Heidi, and you're listening to the Successful Fashion Designer Podcast. We all know that the fashion industry is brutally competitive and it takes loads of hard work to get ahead. The problem is that everyone's secretive and tight-lipped about their ways. After working as a designer and educator for over a decade, I wanted to help break down those barriers and bring you valuable knowledge from industry experts, and this show is exactly where you'll find that. Whether you're trying to break into the fashion world, make yourself more marketable, launch your own label, or become a successful freelancer, we'll help you get ahead in the cutthroat fashion industry. This is episode 47 of the Successful Fashion Designer Podcast, and today I'm chatting with Aileen Coyle, a pattern maker who works in Los Angeles. I was lucky enough to sit down with Aileen in person and chat with her when I was in Los Angeles for my SFD party, and we met up at Hello World Fashion, a design and production studio in the LA area. If you hear a little background noise, it's because we're doing this in a production studio. There's actually people behind us, like sewing and having design meetings. So it's a really cool space, and it adds some nice ambiance. But just a heads up, that's what the background noise is from. I wasn't in my studio like I normally am. I love Aileen's story for so many reasons. First of all, she got her education in Germany, and their education structure is so much different than what we see and know here in the US. And so she talks a lot about how that kind of built her up and gave her a lot of hands-on experience before she even entered the career. It's a really, really cool way they do it over there. She talks about why she loves pattern making. At first, she thought she wanted to be a designer. She was set on doing design, and she kind of fell into pattern making. And she talks about why she loves it because she's problem solving and some other things that you never really would think about, but how as a pattern maker, you don't really take your job home with you, whereas a designer, you seem to be, thinking about design and creation all the time. So she likes having that work-life balance. And she also talks about how she's grown her career over the years, how she's found new job opportunities over and over. And most of those have come from keeping in touch with friends and coworkers and getting out there and creating opportunities. And, that word we don't like to talk about, but that we know works, networking. So listen close to everything Aileen's done in her career to keep advancing from one job to the next, landing her dream job, and creating new opportunities. If you guys like what you hear in the Successful Fashion Designer Podcast, which I know a lot of you do, I get tons of great feedback in the reviews, and a lot of you send me emails or tell me in person, like when I meet you at various industry events or at the party I just had in LA, you tell me how much you love the podcast. And so here's what I'm going to ask you to do. The best way we can help share this content with other listeners is for you guys out there to share it. So here's what I want you to do. Hit pause on this episode and send a text right now to a friend. Maybe it's someone who wants to break into the industry. Maybe it's someone who already works in the industry, but hit pause and text either this episode or the Successful Fashion Designer Podcast in itself to a friend right now. Just say, hey, I just thought you would find this interesting. I listened to this podcast. I really love it, and I wanted to share it with you. I'm sure they'll be grateful. I'll be grateful. I really appreciate all of your support. Thank you so much. Now, let's jump into the interview with Aileen. To access the show notes for today's episode, visit sfdnetwork.com/47. Okay, so first let me explain a little bit more about where we are. We are in a small production facility and design studio in Los Angeles. And I'm sitting here with Aileen. So Aileen, tell us a little bit about what you do in the fashion industry.
Hi. So I work as a pattern maker in LA. I've been working in fashion for over 10 years, and I've kind of honed in on pattern making about 5-6 years ago.
Okay, cool. So you and I chatted before, and you told me how you got started in Germany, and I want you to share a little bit about how that whole structure worked, because the infrastructure and the setup of how you get started in fashion in the German education system is way different than the U.S. So can you tell us what was that like? Yeah,
so I always knew I wanted to be in fashion. It was just kind of like my great grandma was a pattern maker. She made clothes like, I don't think I ever met her, but it's always been in my family. And then I learned sewing from my grandma when I was younger. She taught me how to sew. So she would always make me clothes, and I made my own clothes with her, like when I was young. So I kind of when you're little, you don't really think some people know what they're going to do. I didn't think I was going to actually get into fashion. It was just a hobby. But I think around prom, I realized I didn't want to buy a dress if I could make one.
Yeah.
And I wanted a dress that no one else had, so I made my prom dresses back in high school, and I was like, maybe this is the direction I can go into. And it was just kind of, it just made sense. So I moved to Germany after high school, and I did an apprenticeship there for 3 years, instead of just going straight to college, because in Germany, if you want to go to university, you have to do an apprenticeship before.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so like they have it for all different careers, like, I don't know, like bakers or butchers, like just, any type of career you can think of, you do an apprenticeship, and it's mandatory for fashion design, which is amazing. So I did that for 3 years. I worked for a children's wear company. Okay. And the way it worked is you kind of work for the company full time, and the government sponsors the company to have apprentices.
Okay.
So you work for them, but also they teach you things. They teach you the career, and also I went to school twice or 2 days out of the week, and did like fashion related classes.
So you're like working most of the time, going to school, learning a little bit. It's like you're getting real experience, kind of seeing how this works. Do you like it?
Yeah, it's kind of it's a dual education system.
Yeah.
So you can either do it 2 years or 3 years, and I did 3 years, and it was like, I don't know, on my resume I'd just say like apparel production apprentice. I don't really know what to call it in Germany, but it's kind of, and it doesn't really get recognized here, but there it does.
Okay.
Yeah. And
wait, how'd you end up in Germany? Because
so,
like a lot of, like we're sitting here in Los Angeles, and you're like, I just went to Germany and did this thing.
Oh yeah, totally. So I grew up there, and then my mom's German, my dad's Canadian American. So we moved from Germany to America when I was 11, and then I decided to go back after high school. Yeah. I always knew I wanted to do that, so that was amazing. Yeah, so I lived there for 3 years again. I lived like. My grandparents had like a little apartment upstairs, so I lived with my grandparents for 3 years. It was so nice to get to spend time with them. Yeah. And like the town I grew up in, so that was such an amazing experience, because I still, like, even though I was like going to work in school, I still had like that kind of support system there that, I was still young. I was
family.
Yeah, exactly. It was like a good intro to being an adult, I guess. But that was an amazing experience, because the type of like, they had sort of like a curriculum set up for the apprenticeship, so like we had to do like a little production run, or we had to learn how to use all the machines. There are different types of clothes we had to make, like I made like underwear and knits, wovens. I got to spend a week in like the cutting department learning, or like a week in like quality control. They kind of put us into different parts of the company for a week or 2 weeks. Which
is great. You get to see like how all the pieces work together.
Exactly. Yeah. Whenever like another department needed help, they knew to call on us. And a lot, like sometimes it was just stuffing letters and things like that. But like it was cool. And because I speak English well, I also got to do I got to sit in on a lot of meetings and like translate for like Scandinavian buyers, or like other countries that don't speak German, so I got to fill in as a translator a lot, or I got to translate like the lookbooks and things like that too, so that was really fun. I learned so much there. And then in school we had like our subjects were like all fashion related, so 2 hours out of the week we just did like fabrics. We just learned about fabrics, like the way wovens work, or the way kind of like the way that fabrics are made and everything, which you don't necessarily learn in design school here. You kind of have like a little background on fabrics, but not so much like we did there. Or we did like fashion related math, so we had to do like the radius of a skirt, or like you figure out how to calculate like the distance of buttons and things like that.
Math is used in real life, people.
Totally. Yeah.
Especially as and then you went into pattern making. You use it even more than some of your essential design stuff.
And I was terrible at math in high school too. It was my worst subject. I hated it so much. So like my family thinks it's funny too that now I do such a technical job.
But do you think you like latched onto it because it was in a space that you loved so much? Like you just figured out how to, like your brain started working because you're like, I love fashion so much, I love this. It's not just like solving weird problems in a math test in high school.
Exactly. Yeah, I think when you're doing like math problems, you're never going to use it again.
Right. Like it makes no sense.
It makes no sense. Yeah, you don't need it. So I think it's something I'm good at, but like I think when you're passionate about it, you figure it out.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, so you did the 3 years in Germany, and that was like education, work, like amazing experience.
Yeah.
And then where'd you go from there?
Yeah, so that was kind of like my intro to the fashion world. And then I moved to LA kind of like on a whim. I mean, I wanted to go to design school after that, and I was looking all over the place. Like I visited like schools in Paris or like Amsterdam. While I was in Europe, and I always wanted to move to New York. That was always kind of my plan. But I think when it came time, I got bored of the idea of like, the things I've been planning for so long. So, and I was sick of the cold weather. So I kind of wanted to go somewhere totally new. And I ended up accepting what do you call it? Well, I ended up coming to LA for school.
Okay.
Which was just never really my plan, but then all of a sudden it seemed really great. And yeah, I'm still here. So.
How long ago was that?
That was, I guess 7.5, 8 years ago now.
Okay, it's like 2010-ish.
2010, yeah. Exactly. So and I thought I'd be here for like school and then go somewhere else, but I'm really happy here. I think LA is great, so I'm still here. So I went to FITM after I did the apprenticeship for 2 years, and it was awesome it was awesome having that base already because, I mean, design school is so hard. It's just such an insane amount of work, and I think I heard the dropout rate is like 50% or something.
Oh, God. I had no idea.
I mean, I don't know that as a fact, but I think...
I've not heard that.
It's such an intense, especially when you're cramming like a fashion education into like a 2-year AA degree.
Right.
It's so much work. I mean, I didn't sleep like ever, and I always got sick at the end of every quarter because
you were so exhausted.
Just so exhausted, and I was working while I was in school too, so it was so intense. But I'm so glad I kind of had that base already, so I knew how to sew really well.
Yeah.
And like I like pattern maker skills and stuff. I did really, really good in school, surprisingly, because it was just so much work. But yeah, I loved going to FITM. I think you kind of have to really use the resources that they have too, and they have access to so many good resources. Like I was always in the library, or you get to use like the computer programs and stuff whenever you want. So that was really amazing. I think that as long as you use all the resources that they give you, like you can get so much out of your education there. So I really got a lot out of going to school there.
So kind of taking advantage of like what they put in front of you and all these, sounds like you went a little bit above and beyond of like, okay, I could do this, I can get my coursework done, but like there's all these extra tools and resources that I can just learn and practice or study.
Yeah. I mean, when you know how the industry works already, it's easier. If you're going to class, you're like cramming all this knowledge into your head and then you want to forget about it right away. But I think if you know why you need to know it, it's better. Like I remember we were taking like the computer pattern class, and I loved it. I thought it was so much fun. So, and at that point too, I did not want to be a pattern maker.
Oh, interesting.
I have like every year, how Facebook tells you like the things that happened like years in prior years.
Oh, right. Like 5 years ago you did this.
Yeah. So there's I have like one that I see it every year because it was like, my teacher told me today I'd make a good pattern maker. That's like the worst idea of a career for me. I just
That's
never.
hysterical. Yeah.
And I never thought I would do that. Or I had a friend too, she was a designer, and she's like, you should, I don't know why the pattern makers are so happy, but you should go into that. I'm like, no, I never want to do that.
You wanted to design.
I wanted to design, yeah. That was always my plan. And I was always really good at pattern classes, but I still, while I was in school, I never thought that I would do that as a career. I still wanted to do design.
So it wasn't that you, well, it sounds like maybe you were averse to being a pattern maker. Mm-hmm. Perhaps influenced by the fact that you wanted to do design so badly.
Yes. Yeah.
But what was it about a pattern maker that you were like, oh, I would never do that. It sounds like the worst job ever. Which Facebook keeps reminding you every year.
I know, totally. I think just because it's so technical, you just think of pattern making as math and just kind of lines.
Numbers and.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know, it just seemed like such a boring job to me. But I did, looking back too, I loved those classes. So
and it seems like you had a natural knack for it. Your teachers noticed it, your friends noticed it.
Yeah, totally.
So when did that switch, or when did you wind up going into pattern making? Did you start out in design after you graduated and got your first job and then transition to pattern making, or when did that switch?
So my first job out of school ended up being as a pattern making assistant at BCBG.
Okay.
So I took the job. My friend was already working there as an assistant, so she had a coworker that was leaving, and I had just finished school, so she's like, "Oh, like I know of a job for you." So that was how I got into it, so I got the job there, and I was thinking, after a year I'll switch into design, because that was kind of a thing, like especially there, girls, like that was kind of their way into the door.
Yeah.
And then after a year you were allowed to ask to switch into design. So I was like, oh yeah, that's what I'm gonna do.
Yeah.
So that's how I ended up at BCBG as a pattern making assistant, and yeah, that's just kind of how I fell into doing my career. And
did you wind up loving it?
Yeah, as an assistant, it was kind of mostly just like keeping track of paperwork and stuff like that. Yeah. It was like we weren't actually involved in making patterns. It was mostly kind of like doing like BOMs and I don't know, sewing instructions and things like that. A lot of just organization.
Okay.
But luckily my boss that I worked for there, she let me, and like it was like kind of like it was kind of like special that she let me do that, but she let me make patterns for like the lower budget line there. So whenever I had free time, like kind of on top of my actual job or my regular assignments, she would help me. Like I would go to design, and they would just give me, like easier patterns to do. Yeah, and she would kind of show me how to do them. So that was awesome that I got that opportunity, because most of the pattern makers wanted their assistants to only work for them.
Okay.
And yeah, so I got really lucky in that sense. So I kind of got to use the program and everything, and just kind of slowly start working on things.
Yeah. And did you ask her to get to do that?
I think so. Yeah. I think it was probably kind of like, I don't remember ever asking. I mean, I must have, but she was really supportive of that, and I think she kind of saw that I had like a future in pattern making too. Okay. She was so supportive.
So she maybe pushed you a little bit. You were driven, and it just matched up.
Yeah, it just kind of it just kind of matched up. So that was awesome. And at that point too, I was, I got to a point like after being there for over a year, where I was like, what am I gonna do next? And she knew that too. So that was it just kind of made sense. And it was nice that she helped me learn how to make patterns. But so I was doing that there while I was trying to figure out if I would look for a pattern making job with another company, or what I was going to do. Then this position freed up for an associate pattern maker for the runway team, which they did the runway shows in New York and stuff. So it was kind of it was a high end line that they did. So as soon as that position became available, I knew that was the job that I just knew that was my next step, because it was I was gonna actually learn under somebody how to, make quality patterns and everything. So it took a while for that position to actually become available after the last associate left, because at that point they weren't really hiring people. But I was in the manager's office every single week, asking to be interviewed. I needed to have that job, and I knew eventually it would become available. And the pattern making team over there, they already knew it too. Because I was kind of I talked to my boss, and she was like, "Oh yeah, you need to get that job." Yeah. So she kind of put in a good word for me and stuff too. She was so supportive, and we were both kind of scheming together to get that job.
Yeah.
So I feel it took for probably 4 months or something to finally get interviewed, and then it took even longer to get switched over, because it was such a long process there, because they were kind of slowing down on the company infrastructure. I don't know. So I got that job, and that was the perfect next step for me, because I do and that was kind of also me deciding to actually be a pattern maker at that point too. That's one I wanted to specialize in. So I learned so much there, and it was, as an associate, it was I was kind of doing assistant work for the other pattern makers, but I was also doing my own patterns, and they were helping me with it.
Okay.
And yeah, it's kind of a mix of both. So it was still a lot of keeping track of things, but I was getting my own projects too.
A lot more hands-on experience.
Exactly.
Yeah. Wait, so I have to. So you said it took about like 4 months for you to get the interview, but you were like literally in the manager's office every week asking, and like I love that.
Yeah.
Like push for okay, there's an opportunity. Maybe you say I can apply for it. I think a lot of people would then just sit there and keep going about their normal job. But you were like, I want this opportunity. I'm going to ask for it and then push.
Totally.
Like, what did you actually say? You like go in there and be like, hey, when are we interviewing for this job?
Yeah, because I mean, like it was by that point I had already worked there for a long enough time where I knew, like we all kind of knew each other. So it wasn't like I knew I could just just ask her, like, okay, like anything new, like, because they were waiting for word from, I don't know, like
someone
the
else,
owner,
corporate,
exactly.
Yeah,
so it was
company.
just, I was just kept pushing her as much as I could because I didn't see myself doing anything else. And I think like when you know like what the right thing is for you, like you have to do the best you can.
Yeah.
So.
But I think a lot of people look at that as like being pestery, but I don't see that as being pestery. I see that as being like assertive, or even like as a female, you could be looked at as being like aggressive.
Totally.
But like as a male, I think that would be more, no, you're assertive. Like you know what you want, you're going to ask and you're going to get it. And like you did that, which is awesome.
Yeah.
And it worked.
Totally, yeah. I think you kind of have to feel out the situation too, but in that situation, it was totally appropriate for me to keep asking because it like, it made sense for them to hire someone already within the company for that position, and I knew it just had to be me. So I guess it's different, if you're trying to get a job where you don't know anyone, like if you continuously call, that might be a little bit much. You can kind of,
there's a fine line.
There is
like
a line,
follow up,
but you just kind of have to know, and you kind of have to be smart about it, I guess, in those situations. But yeah.
Okay, so you got the job. It took a while, but you got it, and we're doing your own projects, doing a lot more hands-on stuff. And then where'd you go from there?
So this is super crazy. So I was in that position I was at the company for 3 years. I had that position for well over 1.5 years, I think. And so that by then I'd been in LA for 5 years, and I hadn't been back to Germany to see my family in 5 years. So it was time for me to go home. So like I went home for Christmas for a month. It was just like after that long of time, I was like, okay, I've worked so hard. So I took a month over Christmas. It was less than a month, but then I got invited to a wedding in India like a month later, and I was like, well, I'm going to India, obviously. So I kind of needed to take a lot of vacation, but by that point I had been there for so long that I was kind of ready to like start something new. So it worked out crazy because I was going to leave the company, and then I ended up getting laid off that day, like the day before I flew to India.
Oh, wow.
But it was, oddly, it was like the best thing that could have happened to me. Like you don't never want that to happen to you, but like considering I was actually going to leave that day, it was like such perfect timing.
Did you realize it was a good thing, or it took you like a little while to realize in hindsight that was good?
Because that day actually I interviewed for a pattern making position at BCBG.
Okay, so within the company still.
That day, yeah. And they knew I was going to India, and she was like, okay, I'm excited to talk to you more when you get back. Like, it was like, okay, cool. Yeah, So it came from higher up. Like, nobody knew what was going on.
Oh, yeah.
So I like was looking forward to having like moving up when I got back from India, but yeah, so that was at like 4 p.m. and at 6 p.m. someone came and was like, can you come meet us in the office? And I was like, yeah, sure. And they were like, it's not you, like company's doing layoffs, like, and I was like really offended at the time, but at the same time I knew I had to get home and pack, so I was like, yeah, like where do I sign? Like I have other things to think about right now, like I can cry about it later if I want to. And on the way home I was just like, what just happened? It was so crazy.
So was there like interview for this like advancement, and then like 2 hours later, like
then I was gone.
Big company layoffs.
Exactly,
oh,
yeah.
Gosh.
And I was like, oh, okay. But then on Monday, I was in Dubai, and I woke up to a bunch of texts from like other assistants that also got laid off. So it turns out it was like kind of a big thing. Yeah. So at the time, I was offended, but then I realized it was just they were doing cutbacks. So I was, and it worked out because I got severance. So I went on vacation. And then when I got back, my very first week back, Virginia actually, she came to LA for a couple days, and I was like, why don't I just go to San Francisco and work for you for a week or so, like, because my parents live up there. So I was like, I can visit my parents for a week. Like, I didn't really have much, to do. And so I took the train. I stayed with my parents. I took the train to Virginia's every day and just kind of helped her with pattern and like other stuff, just for fun.
Just as a quick side note, Virginia is a friend of yours from BCBG who runs a fashion company now.
Yeah, fashion founder.
Yeah.
Me. Yes.
I'll link to her in the show notes. I interviewed her on. Did it come out? Now I'm saying this live. I don't know if it came out yet, but I will link to that interview in the show notes.
Yeah. So she's an amazing friend. Yeah. So she had her activewear line at that time.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, she was doing an activewear line.
Okay.
So I just kind of hung out with her for a week and did some work there, and then that week I got a call from my old boss who gave my contact to someone else who was looking for a temp pattern maker. So, sorry. So, as soon as I got back, I interviewed, took the temp job. I was doing knitwear, and then while I was doing that, so I ended up not being without work ever during that time. Like, I thought I was gonna, have some chill time. No, I ended up, as soon as I got back from India, I was working the whole time. Then I got another call about a full-time job right away, and it was my dream company. It was seriously my dream job. So I tested there, I got the job, and it was that was the best year ever, from getting to go on vacation and then getting laid off on the day that you were planning on leaving anyway. It was crazy. And then getting your dream job. It was such a good year.
First of all, how did you get the dream job?
I got reached out to by a recruiter, actually. Okay. Yeah, so it was a recruiter that found me the job. And it was a really young contemporary company. So it was an all-girls office. A lot of people brought dogs to the office. It was just such a beautiful setting, really cool clothes. I loved the work too. It was if you're making stuff that you love to wear too.
That's awesome.
It's cool. Yeah. So it was such a fun. I had so much fun working there because you can kind of take more. You take more pride in something that you really enjoy, and it was such a young company too. The owners were 1 or 2 years older than me. The designer was my age, so everyone was really young. So it was kind of playing dress up too, you know. But it was such a cool experience, and we worked with really amazing fabrics. So we just had I learned a lot, and it was a lot of work. It really was so much work, and it was doing hand patterns too, which I'd never done before. Before it was always computer patterns. You kind of learn in school, but I was always doing computer, but it was all hand patterns. We're always doing ruffles and stuff like that. So it's just so much, and things have lining, and so it's pretty tedious to do everything by hand.
So why would you? I don't know much about pattern making. That's not my area of expertise at all. So why would they have made that decision to do hand versus digital?
Because they were still really new. I think at that point they've only been around for 6 or 7 years or so, but they're a really well-known brand. But yeah, I think.
Is that because it's more so software's really expensive, or it's more okay?
It's crazy expensive.
Okay, so they're newer, so hand patterns make more sense. But why does that really make more sense? Is the price?
The software's so expensive.
Gerber.
Gerber. I think all of them are pretty expensive. But it's
30,000 buy-in, and then there's subscription fees, right?
I think so.
I'm throwing out numbers I think I've heard.
I think that's actually a pretty accurate number.
Pretty pricey. So that's a big investment, pricey. 30 grand.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a big investment. And there were 3 of us pattern makers, so we did everything by hand. But they worked a lot different. In most companies, you do a pattern, it gets sent to cutting, the cutter takes it to sewing, and then there's fittings. They were such a young brand that when I started, the pattern makers were sewing the samples. Yeah, so after I started, I brought in 2 sewers, and so we got to focus on patterns, and then the sewers would sew up the samples. But yeah, and then we did fittings, and then we kind of like refined them, but then we sent the patterns to China, and then they kind of took over production from there. Yeah. So it's like a bit of a different way of working, but it was so hands-on and like, you know, which was cool. Like,
it's like cool. You're like not in front of the screen 8 hours a day. You're like actually like using pencils and rulers and
exactly
French curves and
which is, it's such a good experience, and you get really fast at making like, I mean, they did really like beautiful clothes, and if you're doing it by hand and you're always having to like, you know, you're doing the linings and you're doing like all these ruffles and stuff, you get pretty quick at it too.
Yeah.
So it was like a really good experience. Yeah.
Okay, so that came through Recruiter, and you did that for a year, and it was like this awesome, amazing year. And you're still feeling like you're loving pattern making, or ever thinking like, oh, I wish I was doing the design, or like, where are you at in your heart at this point?
I want to stick to patterns, definitely, because what I like about pattern making now, like having done it for so long, or having done it for a while, I guess, like with design, I think you never stop working. You're always having to come up with like new creative ideas all the time, and I think like, you know, it kind of like crosses over between work and also like your personal life. Like it's kind of, there's not really such a boundary, but with patterns, like it's also very creative, I realized, and I love that about it.
Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, because I mean, it's technical, so like there's always an answer, you know, like you get the sketch and you have to make it work, and I like that because it's a fun challenge too. It's problem solving, yeah. And so I like that about it, and it's creative too, because like, and I mean, depending on where you're working too, but like you get to, you have to solve the problem in your own way. So that's what I really like about it. And then like at the end of the day, you know, you go home and there is like a boundary between work and, you know, not work. So
it's not like you could just be on Pinterest like constantly thinking of ideas for the next season, or you go out, you're shopping, and you're like, oh, taking pictures of all this inspiration.
Yeah.
It's like you're not drafting patterns out on the weekend when you're wandering around doing something.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
There's
totally.
A line.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of important for like your mental health
sanity.
too. Exactly. Your sanity.
Like the industry's already so intense and brutal. It's
really
like nice to have that line.
Yeah, it really is. Because I mean, just like fashion really is like such a brutal industry. It's hard. You have to work hard at also keeping your sanity sometimes. Like with my last job too, I was working like Saturdays and Sundays pretty often. You know, when it gets into that like crunch time, you're just working all the time. And it takes a lot, you know, you don't realize it, like, because when you're at work, you're just kind of working, but then, like, over time, it does take a lot out of you, you realize, like, it's just kind of something then that, like, I have no problem, you know, going to work for 8 hours or whatever, but after a while, it adds up, and you're like, whoa.
I need to, like, breathe.
Exactly, yeah. So,
So, okay, so you got your dream job, you did that for a year, and then what happened?
Yeah, so I did that for like a year and a half, but then, like, unfortunately, it was because they were such a new company, like, there wasn't really any room for growth for me there, pretty much, and it was sad because I would have wanted nothing more than to, you know, keep working there because I loved it. It was like, and it was all girls, like, it was just such a great work environment, and the work was really fun, but yeah, I've come so far in my career, and you know, like I moved to LA for this, and I've worked so hard at this career that I couldn't just sort of like get comfortable in a job. I felt like I still needed to grow, so I made the decision to leave. I took a production pattern making job, which, like, there's first pattern making, but you're kind of making like the first patterns that mostly get used in like photo shoots or stuff like that, but then it goes on to
prototypes and samples.
Stuff like that, and then it'll go into production pattern making, which is like, you know, for production. So there's a lot more work that goes into that. You're doing like you basically creating a language for someone most likely in another country to read, you know, and they only go off of the information that you give them. So
like, okay, can we break that down a little bit more? Because there's a lot of people listening who, like, are not in the industry, and, like, that could feel very confusing to them.
Totally.
So explain a little bit more in detail of, like, okay, your first pattern, which is just making samples or like photo shoot samples, versus a production pattern where you're like, okay, we're gonna make 1,000 of these.
Yeah, exactly.
Explain a little more in detail about that.
Okay, so first pattern making, it's more creative because you get the sketch from design and you create the first pattern. So it's very like, you're doing the shape and like the silhouette and everything. It's more creative. And you don't need to focus much on the actual physical pattern as you do on what the garment looks like.
The end result.
Yeah, because you're making it and then, it'll go, that's the sample that'll, get shot or get kind of used for the lookbook. And then for production pattern making, you're taking that pattern, but you're making it to make like 1,000 or however many to make the bulk garments, and it's a lot more focused on the pattern, and you're doing like fitting after fitting until you get it right. So,
like you're tweaking tiny little adjustments.
Tiny adjustments, yeah, exactly. So you're making like just teeny adjustments, or you're making like like all the notches have to be right and things like that. Like you just have to make sure it's the pattern is something that you can read, or that whoever's sewing it can read accurately, so that there's no mistakes in production. So it's a totally different job.
In some companies, is it actually?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for the most part, yeah.
Okay. Okay, right, because you said you then got hired to do production pattern making, versus first pattern.
Mm-hmm, yeah, okay. So when I started there, I was doing first through production, but the work just kept getting more and more.
Yeah.
So I switched to only production.
Okay, gotcha.
And then someone else was doing the first, who I'd worked with in the past. So that was kind of cool because we kind of like, everybody works differently too, and having to work with other people's patterns, it's also a thing. So
like, what am I inheriting here?
Exactly. Yeah. So I was doing production there on the computer too, and it was like a very fast turnaround because this job was fast fashion, which before I always did contemporary. So like the clothes were a lot easier, or the clothes were
simplified designs.
Very simplified,
Okay.
like t-shirts or kind of like more simple garments. But I was doing the production, so we were doing like fitting after fitting, and having to make
really
like the tiniest changes and stuff, and if they were like knits, like sometimes, or if they were dyed, we had to make sure like that the shrinkage was correct and everything, which is like, I don't know. It can be really difficult. So it was a totally different way of working for me, but I learned a lot, and I liked kind of, getting like my hands into that sort of aspect of pattern making, but I definitely enjoy doing first patterns more. So I worked there for I think 5-6 months, and then now I just realized it wasn't for me. I enjoyed the experience, but I think that it's just not what I want to do long term. Because I want to like enjoy what I'm doing too. Like my experiences in contemporary and fast fashion too, like it's, I don't know, how do I say it? It's like I don't really wear fast fashion either. I don't know. Like,
so it's like not relatable for you.
It's not relatable. Yeah, exactly. And I don't know, if you're doing it full time, you kind of want to enjoy it too, or like, I mean, if you're fortunate enough to get to enjoy it, I guess. But I don't know. I decided to leave.
Okay, so I want to hear a little bit more about the differences, because like, so maybe outside of the perspective of like first pattern versus production pattern, like a step outside of that, like what would be the differences in terms of like, maybe just to give people a perspective on what's your timeline in some of the other brands that you were used to working with versus the timeline in fast fashion, like from the time you maybe get sketch, and then you have bulk production. You have your first sample and your photo samples, and maybe bulk production versus like what are we looking at here?
Okay.
Yeah.
So they're kind of similar, I think. Like with my previous jobs in contemporary, it was usually every 3 months we'd have a collection out, and that was the thing. You have like
4 years,
spring, summer, holiday. Yeah, you have those 4 seasons, and that's what you're working up to.
Yeah.
So usually, like, it'll get really busy like 1 month out of 3.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the timeline. You have a date for the photo shoot or the show or something, and that's what you're working up to. Whereas with fast fashion, it's just like a never-ending like hamster wheel. It's just it's just you're always like working on something new, and it just hits the stores
piece after piece after piece.
Yeah, like it hits the stores as soon as it's ready. So we'd have like delivery dates, but they were kind of like all different delivery dates. Usually we'd have kind of like a 3-month from like when the order was placed to when it gets shipped to stores, sort of, but it totally varied.
Okay.
Some were like sooner, some were later. So I just always had to follow the ship date and like go based off of that. But then there's always fittings, and like a lot of the companies that I worked with, because they kind of did licensing for other companies. So I would send it to the companies to fit, and then I would get notes back. So and
explain
like
in
sometimes
like 2
photos.
sentences how licensing works for someone who might not know what that arrangement is.
Totally. So we kind of did all the, we did like the pattern, the sewing samples. We did handle the production, but then the company they're the ones that place an order, and they kind of outsource the work, basically. Yeah. And they outsource it to various companies, usually.
They run it through your infrastructure because you guys are really set up, established, you have all the systems in place. Maybe they just don't have that in-house, or it just doesn't make sense to do that.
Exactly.
And so they...
Yeah, so they kind of outsource they'll probably have like, what do I call it? Yeah, basically like the clothing production will get outsourced to a different company. So that's what I was doing. And I forgot what we were talking about.
The fast fashion, we were looking at the differences between the two. Of like, I guess I was trying to really understand. I mean, I know you said you don't wear fast fashion, so it just didn't feel relatable, which is totally fair. But just as far as like the workload, like behind the scenes, it just seems like the other setup with the contemporary work, you were a little bit more on a schedule, and the fast fashion is like you said, never ending. Just turn.
Yeah, so you just follow like the ship date, and that's that's when you have to have it out by. It's like a totally different way of working, but.
So it's an interesting experience. You learned a lot, but you're like, this is not working.
Yeah, it's just it's a completely different beast. Like it really is, and I think like, and after being in the industry for a while too, like, and I have a lot of friends that work in the industry. Like if you kind of get into one sort of category, you kind of stick there because that's what you're good at.
It's
and
hard you get like pigeonholed.
Totally. And like with fast fashion, it's just something you think it's still within the realm of fashion, but it's a totally different thing. Yeah, it really is. So it just wasn't. Unfortunately, it just wasn't for me. Which I'm totally okay with.
Yeah, you discover. It's good to discover what you don't want to do.
Exactly. Yeah. I didn't mind. I took a gamble at something new, and I have no regrets about it. I learned a lot, but I'm like ready to get back into contemporary. So I've been talking to a couple of companies, and like today I got a job.
Let's not gloss over that. Okay. We're sitting here and like you show up to the interview, we're just chatting, and you're just like interrupt, like, wait a second, because when I chatted with you on the phone last week or whatever it was, you're like, I can meet up, I'm in between jobs, and then you come here today and you're like, I just got a job offer like this morning, which is so exciting.
Super excited about it. Because I kind of like I want to take my time, because like now I've been doing that. I've been doing this for long enough where I want to really stick to a company for a while. Like I've kind of like built up my career a little bit, and now I'm ready to kind of like work somewhere, like kind of take my time to find the right match. Yeah. So luckily I've been able to do that. So I've kind of had a little bit of time off, which is like so nice and needed too.
Yeah.
Sometimes like, you know, not everyone gets that luxury, but it's been nice to just, I don't know, like focus on myself. Yeah, I've just been like going to museums and stuff like that, which is cool. But yeah, I'm also like ready to, you know, do something new. So yeah, so I've been like talking to other companies, and today I got a job, which is awesome, with like another contemporary label, and like really cool, kind of like within what I'm already doing. So super excited about that. Yeah, and like I'm like getting so bad at this now.
No, you're doing great. I think you mentioned before we started the interview where this opportunity came from, the job you just got today.
Oh yeah.
Came from?
Yeah, so a friend that I worked with on another company, so, which is awesome. Yeah, we worked together in the past, and so she like referred me to this job, and I think that's kind of really important, working in this type of industry, and I'm sure like other industries too, but especially like those creative industries. Like I hear in like film, it's kind of similar too. It's like all about, you know, the connections that you make. Yeah, so like I've been talking to 2 different companies, and both were referred to by friends, and both really cool labels. So I think, yeah, I mean, you know, especially with like, they're both past coworkers, and especially, you know, you want to just like help each other out, and you know, it's also good, like you have to have like a good like working relationship and stuff, and like a lot of coworkers, like, or I guess, you know, certain coworkers I've stayed in touch with over the years. Like I've also helped, you know, friends from other companies get jobs and stuff, and I think that's kind of the best way, you know, because you already know how a person works, and you know if like they're a good fit for a company. So I think that really, I mean, it's honestly the best way to kind of like get your foot into the door, or you know, get a coworker or something if you already know someone. I mean, it sounds like, with maybe one exception that you said the recruiter found you. Yes.
Outside of that, like trickled throughout this conversation is always like, oh, and then my friend, or oh, my past boss referred me, or something.
Exactly.
It was always like a contact.
Yeah, and that's kind of, I think that's how a lot of this industry works, for sure. I mean, when I was at the last the job that I really enjoyed, like a lot of I got a friend a job, and then the sewers I'd worked with at a different company too. So I mean, it's a lot of kind of networking, or just, you know, using your contacts, because I mean, like I said, you already know if someone can do the job or not.
Right.
I mean, I have friends too, or like I have friends that I went to school with or something, where I'm like, oh, you know, I want to, you know, if there's a job open, I'm like, I want to help you, but love you as a friend, but no. So it kind of goes like both ways. I think you kind of know.
You do, for sure.
So,
I mean, you just made a comment of like keeping in touch and stuff, but like, do you feel like there's anything specifically or consciously, or maybe it's just in your nature and your character, which I find a lot of times it is, that you've done to like maintain these relationships over the years, and then when you are looking for a job, it's not like, oh, I haven't heard from you for 5 years, and you're like, hey, I need a job, do you know of anything? And like that rubs people the wrong way. So I don't know, like, have you ever really thought about it, or?
I guess, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. You know, there's definitely, you know, if like old school friends or something hit you up, because like I've had that too with other companies, where like they'll see on Facebook or something, or LinkedIn when I'm working, and they're like, oh, like if there's any job openings, can you let me know? And
they're like just there when they need something.
Exactly. I mean, if I think they'd have like the skill sets or something, then totally, like I would be happy to refer you. But I think like the friends that kind of helped me out this time, I've actively kept in touch with them, you know, like old coworkers. Like you always want to like kind of hang out and like talk about your jobs and stuff. Like I've definitely maintained some good like friendships with old coworkers, because you have a lot in common, you know, you kind of went through the same thing together. So like we don't see each other all the time or anything, but or you know, you'll see like a work-related meme and you'll like send them to each other or something, like stuff like that. So but I've definitely kept in touch with like several of my old coworkers, because they're, you know, you spend 8 hours a day with someone too, they really grow on you. So it's like a nice thing. They're kind of like, I mean, it's like a special kind of friendship after a while. Like even if you're working together, you kind of keep that like professional sort of like professional but also friendly, but like after you leave a job then you can actually be friends.
Yeah. So it happens, I mean, it sounds like you know, it winds up kind of happening somewhat organically.
Yeah, totally.
Just because you wind up becoming friends, like you have all these commonalities, you get along.
Yeah.
But there's also so much more value that, you know, I think each side can offer to each other in the long run.
Yeah.
And like your whole career is pretty much a perfect example of that.
Yeah, totally.
So,
yeah. My grandma found me my first apprenticeship, actually.
Yeah?
Yeah, because I wasn't, I mean, I wanted to get into fashion, but I wanted to study, like go to university there, but it's like you know, going to high school here, it's not the same as going to high school there.
Yeah.
So it was like really difficult. So my grandma's the one who like saw it in the paper, called the company, and like got me an interview.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Yeah, she like, I mean, she
sounds like she was a go-getter.
Totally, yeah. Because I mean, she knew I wanted to come to Germany, and so she like found a way to make it work.
So she had like a little ulterior motive.
Totally,
but
yeah.
Still. Mm-hmm. That's so cool. Okay, so here you are. You just got this new opportunity, and
so
happens.
Continuing my career in pattern making. Yeah, exactly.
I love it.
Yeah,
I love it. This has been really fun to chat with you.
Yeah,
and
thanks.
Hear about
You too.
You've done. Oh, thank you. If people out there listening want to connect with you somehow, what's the best way to do that? LinkedIn, or do you have a website, or what?
Yeah,
online?
for sure. LinkedIn. On
Instagram?
LinkedIn,
No,
it's
okay.
Aileen Coyle, AILENCOYLE.
Okay, and I'll put links to that in the show notes.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, fantastic. And I'll end with the one question I ask everybody at the interview.
Okay.
At the end of the interview. What is one thing that people never ask you about working in the fashion industry that you wish that they would, or that you would like to talk more about, but nobody ever asks about that aspect of your work in the industry?
Interesting. I don't know if it's like super relevant, but I was having a conversation with a friend the other day who, like, you know, she's kind of in, I don't want to call her a rut, but like she's kind of in a place in her career where she's like trying to, you know, figure out like where to go, or like do something else or something like that. And she's like, you know, you don't have to worry about that. Like, you've like already kind of, you know, you have a career path, like you've already made it. And like, I'm like, luckily I did, you know, find my career, which is amazing. Like, I'm actually like, you know, when you think about it, and I was thinking about it recently, you know, like I've already surpassed what I thought I would do as a kid. You know, you think you're going to go to fashion, so cool, and like on one hand you think you're going to be like the next big designer, but realistically like you have no idea. And like, to think that I've worked for like the companies that I've worked for and stuff, like I've actually like done pretty good, and like, you know, young me would be proud of me. So
I love
that's
that.
like kind of cool. Yeah, but at the same time, like, you know, like even though I have this like path, it's you know, you're still always working at it, and you never ever stop learning, especially with pattern making. Like, that's why like most, like, you know, good pattern makers are like way older, because and they like work forever. Skill. It totally is, because you never stop learning. Like, it's just something that something you just have to, you know, keep working hard at, keep learning and stuff. So I actually really like that about it. But at the same time, yeah, like, you know, luckily I have sort of my path figured out, and that's amazing. Like, I think about it sometimes, like if I were to do anything else, like, well, you know, you kind of have those days. Like, I think everybody has those days. Like, should I do something different? I can't think of anything else that I would, you know, want to get into. So that's good, but also, yeah, like with, you know, me being in between work for a little bit too, you kind of get like down about it sometimes. Like, what if I don't find like the right match? And luckily, you know, luckily today I'm like, got good news, but you kind of do think about it, or like, you know, where am I going to go from here? So, but yeah, it's cool because I kind of have like my path figured out, but only one topic. It's not as easy as it seems, you know. Like, I think from an outside perspective, it's like, okay, like she's a pattern maker, like this is what she's got. But yeah, like for me, it's still like, I don't know. I guess everybody deals with their own like work issues, sort of. So, yeah, and I think like I never want to stop growing when it comes to that, and I never want to be too comfortable either. Yeah, I like that mindset.
Yeah, I don't want to, you know, like be comfortable in a position. So always want to keep growing. I don't know if that's like relevant to your question.
No, I love that. No, I love the part of like the young me would be proud of me, and like you sometimes have to step back and look at what you've built and where you've come and what your path has been, but then also appreciate, especially when you're in like
I know you said maybe not really abrupt, but just like in a downtime, you're like maybe not feeling good about what you're doing, or like you're in between jobs and you're like really stuck or frustrated, and like looking back and like, you know what, no, I have done this, and this is great, and I've put a lot of work into it. It's like that iceberg effect, where like you just see the iceberg at the top, you don't see all the stuff underneath that like built it all, right?
Exactly.
And so just to like remember that and be mindful of that and be appreciative of that, and like sitting here today, or like my path is all carved out, but like who knows, maybe in 10 years you look back and you'd be like, oh wow, however old you are, 30-year-old me would have been, 25-year-old me would have been like so proud of where I am now.
Yeah,
and so like then
true.
that's also an exciting mindset to think about, what you said with the kid thing, where like, oh well, you know, there's always all these more amazing things that can still happen, and so not being comfortable, keeping growing, like moving towards that.
Yeah, like
I had a lot of takeaways from that actually.
Yeah, right. Yeah, like you kind of want to like you always want to look forward, but like it's good to look back sometimes too. Yeah, like just to keep yourself, you know, like not grounded, but just to remind yourself like
what you've done.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love that.
Totally.
Awesome. Thank you so much for chatting.
Yeah, thank you.
This was really fun.
Yeah,
awesome to have you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Successful Fashion Designer Podcast. I really do appreciate each and every one of you. As I'll remind you, every listener counts, and as the show approaches 1 year old and we continue to grow and get more, a bigger reach and get all of this amazing content out to other designers and other industry professionals who are trying to get ahead in their career, or people who are trying to break into the industry, I really would be super appreciative if you would share this episode or the podcast with a friend. So if you didn't already at the beginning of the episode, go ahead and do that now. Just pick up your phone, send a text message to a friend, and share the podcast. I'm sure they'll thank you for it, and I know I will definitely thank you for it. I really appreciate your support. Last, if you'd like to learn any more about the resources mentioned in this episode, visit the show notes at sfdnetwork.com/47. Thanks so much, and I'll talk to you soon.